Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The defense claims she was framed in a police cover-up.
On the scene to keep you informed at every turn.
In Dedham, Katie Benoit, NBC 10 News.
With live updates and legal analysis.
What happens then? Did the trial have to stop?
A lawyer's only as good as his or her word.
They failed miserably and they'll continue to fail.
On air, online, and on the app. NBC 10 News has the latest on the retrial of Karen Read.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Gene Valicenti. Court is over for the day, so let's get right to our daily debrief involving NBC 10's Katie Benoit, our reporter on the scene, and our legal analyst today, Morjieta Derisier, who's been with us before. All right, today we're winding down. We're getting down to the final witnesses. We heard from an accident reconstruction expert, an ARCCA person called by the defense today. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the third accident reconstruction specialist we've heard from? One for the state and now two for the defense. Katie, is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. This is the third. There's also a second member of ARCCA that also will likely testify probably in the next coming days. But Dr. Wolfe was the only one on the stand today, and he does work for ARCCA. Okay,
and what was he able to show? That he did reconstruction of the scene, and he actually had a crash test dummy, which the state did not have. Set up the soundbite. Then we're going to hear direct examination by Alan Jackson for the defense.
So Dr. Wolfe did a number of tests using a crash dummy, also using a dummy arm to see what the impact would be at different miles per hour of a taillight slamming into the arm of a dummy. So there was tests done at a few different miles per hour, including 24 miles per hour. And this crash dummy was also wearing clothing that was similar to John O'Keefe's clothing. So they said they were trying to get as many variables, try to make this testing as accurate as possible. The dummy was hanging from kind of a suspension from a crane. So the prosecution did bring up that that's not real life. A person, if they are struck by a car, goes flying. They're not just dangling in the air kind of thing.
So the dummy's feet were off the ground?
They were on the ground, but kind of like on their tippy toes almost, if that makes sense. But when the crash happened, the dummy kind of just swung, wouldn't go flying like you would expect in a pedestrian crash.
Okay, unusual. Let's listen to the soundbite, and then Morjieta will get your take on it. Go ahead.
Reach any opinions or conclusions as to relating to the punctures of holes in the hoodie that you saw that was related to John O'Keefe?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion or conclusion as to whether or not the damage that you saw to the hoodie related to John O'Keefe is consistent or inconsistent with a impact from a right rear taillight of the subject SUV?
It was inconsistent.
And what do you base that opinion on?
Based upon all of the impact testing that we did with the clothed ATD arm in the laboratory as well as the field.
In any of the testing that you did you ever see taillight pieces cut, puncture, or fray the sleeve of that hoodie?
No.
All right. Well, some pluses and minuses there, Morjieta, for the defense. That's their witness. Go ahead.
So presentation is everything, as we know in this case, right? And I think what's important is that at some point during this direct examination, there was visual for the jury to see. And as you can imagine, this case is really becoming daunting to the jury. A lot of them, I've heard, are starting to, look like they're falling asleep. So this is actually something they can see. It's tangible. So I think the presentation came out well. I will leave it up to the jury to kind of decide which pieces of it they're going to believe in terms of, the scratches and the marks of that nature. But in terms of presentation, this was actually a really good witness for the defense. We had some, last week there was an issue with the other officer, but this was a clean presentation. It's something that I think they can take back with them and truly deliberate on.
Even with the dummy swinging in an unnatural fashion, and even without that clothing ripping, how did he get the scratches then? That seems to be the weak point today.
And even if it is a weak point, they're comparing it, as we call it, the battle of the experts, right? So even if it's not an exact replica of what happened, it gives them a visual as to using their common sense, even if the prosecution's version is going to be possible, right? So some visual is better than no visual. And even though this is not a perfect science, they know that jurors have common sense, right? But it's better to kind of see what could actually be possible than not giving them any visual.
Okay. By the way, if you're watching us live here just after 5 o'clock, you're welcome to chat with us or ask us a question. I got a question emailed into me. One of our viewers wanted to know if he had a jacket on or if he had clothing on against the cold weather. How did he get the scratches underneath? And I recall us debating. There's a debate as to whether or not he had a coat on. Isn't there? Or he didn't have a coat, right, Katie?
So he did not have a coat on. Last year, there was some confusion in the first trial about witnesses saying he might have had a coat on, but he did not. It was a hoodie, and it was pretty light for the weather.
Yeah, it was a hoodie, but in the test, the hoodie didn't rip, the hoodie didn't tear, leaving to how do you get scratches if the hoodie doesn't tear? Okay, that's the answer. By the way, anybody else who wants to get in? Oh, you're welcome. We'll try to answer your questions as best as we can. Now, let's go to cross-examination. Hank Brennan for the state, going after the same witness, the ARCCA accident reconstruction person. Let's listen.
Is the result of this, doesn't it?
In terms of the impact speed?
Yes, the impact speed can change the result of this, of the damage to the right rear taillight, can it?
Correct.
And the angle of the arm can change the damage to that right rear taillight, can't it?
It can, yes.
Scott, our producer, do we have video of the demonstration, the video that the jurors saw of the impact and the swinging crash test dummy? Do we have that? No, we don't. We don't. Okay. All right. Let's move forward then. This outside. Before I do that, Morjieta, your take on that and any effectiveness there for the state?
So, you have to remember that Hank Brennan is a defense attorney, right? So his cross-examination is going to come off like a defense attorney, but that's not his job here, right? His job is to prove his case, not disprove the defense's case. And that's what he did here, which was great, but that's not really his job. So, the defense's job is to prove reasonable doubt. And even if his cross was clean and this was a really good witness for him to have a very strong cross, his job is not to disprove the defense's case, right? So yes, it was a win for the prosecution in terms of presentation, and he got his answers in and the witness answered them, very cleanly, but that's not the objective of the prosecution's role in this case.
Okay, outside, Karen Reed left the court. She spoke to reporters and they asked her, how do you think Wolfe did for you on the stand today? Roll that, we'll listen into the gaggle.
Karen, your opinion on Wolfe, does that prove your case?
I believe so. No impact.
What did you think about Brennan trying to discredit him?
I don't even know where to begin. The math is wrong. The numbers changed. It was 26.3, then it was 23.6, and 11.68 to 9.38 is a 21% increase. So that math is a lie, and it's not even any basis for a forced calculation.
Okay, short, but I get it. Did he help you? She said yes. I think he did. All right, we're winding down. Morjieta, do you still think she's not going to take the stand?
This case gives surprise after surprise. I feel like at this point, she may not take the stand because it's Friday. There was a presumption that they are only going to have about a week for their presentation, and they've done that minus, a day off because of the weather or whatever the case may be. So there's a strong possibility at this juncture she may not testify, which is to be expected, right? Because I think there's a lot of reasonable doubt already that has been highlighted in this case. So why take the risk and put her on the stand and have her subjected to cross-examination by the prosecution?
So you think her side is feeling pretty good tonight?
I think that there's an overwhelming amount of reasonable doubt. And I think the hard part is that this case is so salacious that everybody thinks that she has to put on a case, and she doesn't. All she has to do is disprove the Commonwealth's case, and everyone's expecting the defense to put on this show and this examination when they really don't have to. And it really falls down to the investigation. The investigation, and I think we talked about it before, gives rise to this Bowden defense, which is a specific instruction that the judge will give to the jury about the lack of due diligence that was done with this police investigation. And that may be the tipping scale to the reasonable doubt that the defense needs in this case without her testifying.
Okay. Katie, what's ahead? That's a wrap for the week. What's ahead next week?
Yes, so Wolfe will be back on Monday. There's still a couple of witnesses that need to testify for the defense. And outside the courthouse, too, I know we were just talking about this before the show started, a lot more supporters are starting to show up from Karen Read's side and Pink. At the beginning of the trial, there wasn't a lot of people here. The buffer zone's a little bit further back, but now there's been some changes to the buffer zone. So it seems like more people are around the courthouse, maybe waiting for this case to wrap up and something happens soon.
Okay, well, that means we'll all be back next week. For now, I'm Gene Valicenti. Thanks, Morjieta, and thanks, NBC 10's Katie Benoit. I'm in the newsroom. I'll see you at 6. Have a good weekend.
The trial captivating a nation.
A forensic scientist testified victim John O'Keefe's DNA was found on the defendant's taillight, but there was also other DNA present.
The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture of 3 contributors.
With regard to the other 2 contributors, who were they?
They could be anybody.
I mean, was there a struggle? Is this conclusive of anything?
O'Keefe's clothing had other DNA on it too, leading the defense to point the finger at 2 other police officers.
NBC 10 News has the latest on the retrial of Karen Read.